Hi everyone, this is Matthew's Movie Mentions. We are on to week 9, so we're now into March, and I had a surprise need to go away for work for several days this week, so that actually presented a good opportunity to watch more films, both the journeys to and from the training course I was on, and then staying in a hotel. So I took that chance, and I've had an incredibly good week of films. So it's been several weeks of a mixed range of films and not being sure what to focus on. I think I'm reaching a place now where I'm watching possibly lauded films or films that should be good from people I like, as well as classic films that I feel I should have seen, and a mix of new films coming out that I'm interested in. So, yeah, quite good. I'm beginning to get into a groove, hopefully, possibly. So, this week I'm discussing What Happened to Monday, Mute, A Futile and Stupid Gesture, Galaxy Quest, Rent, Christine, Their Finest, and LA Confidential. So, What Happened to Monday is another sign of Netflix putting out a huge amount of content. The show sounded like someone basically watched Orphan Black and wanted to do that concept as a movie. It's a dystopian future where siblings are outlawed, forbidden, and then one man, William Dafoe, keeps his 7 granddaughters named after it each day of the week, and they can each go out on the day of the week that is their name, all pretending to be the same person. And they're all played by Noomi Rapace. It was surprisingly good. The story was more interesting than I expected. I thought it might be a fairly standard 1984 V for Vendetta type dystopian future. It had a lot more nuance to that, and there were a lot of difficult decisions that a number of characters had to make, and they gave us discussion on those decisions and a bit of insight into why they might or might not make them. So, yeah, surprisingly very good. Really enjoyed it. Mute, I watched. It's the new Duncan Jones film. I love Moon. It's one of the great science fiction films. This I watched because of that, but it's actually a pretty average thriller. It's set in a Blade Runner-inspired future. There have been a lot of different takes on this and people with different views, so it split opinions quite a bit. For me, the film was only okay, and I came away with a big question of I didn't understand why this was set in this science fiction futuristic world. The world actually had no bearing on the story, which is fine for the aesthetic choice of this is how you present it, but I always feel that there should be a reason that you're putting the effort in and showing it in this way, rather than just setting it in the modern world, and I felt that the science fiction nature was just for the visual look of it. A Futile and Stupid Gesture, another Netflix feature. This was one I had actually been looking forward to. I do like the National Lampoon films and content. I was absolutely not disappointed. It's a biographical tale about the founders of National Lampoon, and it fused the format, the biopic visual, a film following a person's life, with the comedy and the style of National Lampoon as well, in an absolutely superb way. It was incredibly unique. The film was very upfront about what it was doing, saying, we know we've cast people who don't necessarily look like the actors, like Chevy Chase, for instance, but they're people who can portray them well. And yes, we know this person was actually 3 different people, but you can appreciate the narrative choice of making it one person. They just told us that up front. And then they did amazing things with the older person, with the modern version of the person who was talking to the camera actually being in scenes and interacting with people and telling them what's going on to keep the story moving for them. It was a refreshing take on this style, in the same way that I, Tonya was, that did things that were very interesting. So that was excellent. For Pop Culture Deprived over the next couple of weeks, I watched Galaxy Quest, which is one of the great science fiction comedies. It lampoons elements of Star Trek and fandoms and fans in general, but it doesn't denigrate those things. And the film itself is good enough to be a quality film and to be enjoyable. We go into a lot more detail on the show, so that's worth listening to, but you cannot go wrong with Galaxy Quest. And then the other film that I watched for it was Rent. I should have seen this a long time ago because I do like modern musicals. I can appreciate Rent in its historical context. It is a terrific piece when you think about when it came out and what it was doing about gender, sexuality, race, many different discussions going on in there, the gentrification of the city. I'm not sure it's aged as well as it could have. There are elements that show that this was someone's first major work. And in that, I found it a real shame that Jonathan Larson passed away before this became a proper big show, as it has become. We would have gotten some excellent work from him throughout his life. I watched Christine, which is based on the story of a newsreader who shot herself live on TV. It's a myth I'd heard a number of times, and this film is actually her tale. Yeah, really interesting, chillingly dark at times. It was an insight into this ambitious person who wants to go far in their career, but the expectations of how to deliver the news, the prejudices of being a woman working in that world. It was excellently told. It was very, very good, quite gripping all the way through, and the performances were wonderful. The next film was Their Finest, which I was recommended to by @MessyFriend70 on Twitter. I'm not usually a huge fan of British cinema, particularly this kind of film that often has a fairly rose-tinted view of things in the past and it tries to make light of them. But I was actually pleasantly surprised. It's another look at someone dealing with prejudices and the societal structures set up against them. A woman trying to work in creating films and writing films in wartime Britain. Stories about making films told on film are usually quite fun as well, so I enjoyed all of that. The final act started off very obvious. Everything that we expected to come together started coming together, until finally it didn't, and then it took this huge twist of doing stuff that I did not expect to do, and it was much more moving because of those choices it made, so that was excellent. And finally, I watched LA Confidential, which is definitely one I should have watched a long time ago. I've always been recommended to see it as a film I would enjoy. Actors I enjoy, telling a dark story in a manner that I quite like. I'm glad I've finally seen it. I saw a video essay about Rent that talked about how visual storytelling like film can't do nuanced shades of grey in stories, but I would hold up LA Confidential as a film that does do exactly that. There's whole discussions in this about how far you should go to do the right thing of framing criminals to make sure you get a conviction, about whether you should rail against injustices or problems, or whether you should work within a system to try to make changes. There was a lot of that in this film done really well as again, being a really interesting and well-told film. I don't feel it came down necessarily on either side of what was right and what was wrong, so that was good. My recommendation this week is definitely A Futile and Stupid Gesture. That was a 10 out of 10 film. I like National Lampoon, so that definitely helped the enjoyment of the story. But the way it was told, the way they mixed the real world that produced this film, as well as the fictional world where the film was being presented, it was so impressive. It was pulled off with a lot of panache and style. So over the next week, I've got a few new films come out on Sky that I'm looking forward to watching, some bigger blockbusters, so definitely get them in. No pop culture deprived recordings, so I am free and open to watch whatever I want. So as ever, please send me recommendations. Happy to put them on my list and try to check out anything you think I would enjoy. So I will see you next week for week 10.